Was Jesus a myth? Now, this claim often circulates around chat rooms on the internet. It's actually been made popular several years ago by an independent film called Zeitgeist, the movie, and then it resurfaced again with Bill Maher's Religulous. And what you've all probably seen this somewhere down the road. There's usually a little infographic that has a picture of Jesus or an animation of Jesus and then an animation of some other Egyptian god or Greek god or mythical god. And then they list comparisons of things that this god did before Jesus was on the earth and how they line up exactly with Jesus. And they use this to show that Jesus' story is nothing more than the retelling of ancient myths. Now the question really is this valid? But even more than that, does this Jesus myth approach really have any value to it? But before we ask that question, though, let's just look at that, the validity of Jesus as a myth. Now there's several contenders for the ancient myths that go against Jesus, but there's three that are the most popular. There's Horus, Mithras, and Osiris. And those are the three, if you've seen this, you've probably seen those three more than any other three. And I'll give you a list of what they say Horus has done. Horus is supposedly the son of God, or the son of the god Osiris. He was born of a virgin. He was baptized in a river by Anup the baptizer, who was later beheaded. He healed the sick and the blind. He was tempted alone in the desert. He had 12 disciples. He raised a man named Asar from the dead, which translates to Lazarus. He walked on water, cast out demons. He was crucified, and 3 days later was resurrected. Now, if someone gave you that list, and generally the way they do that, they give you this list, and they say, who do you think I'm talking about? And of course, your first instinct is to say Jesus, and they'll say, no, this is a story of Horus. And the idea is to steamroll someone of faith with a list of information that they don't have time to verify to prove to them that their belief is invalid. But here's the thing. That's exactly the purpose of a steamroll. A steamroll is meant to overload the person you're talking with so that they cannot respond. It's not a very valid way of discussion. It's not a valid way of debate. And here's the truth about Horus. The first truth is there's no validity to any of those claims. None at all. Horus was a mythical Egyptian god. His father was Osiris. His mother was Isis. He was the god of the underworld. Now, the parallels and the content of what they're trying to find come from what's called the Book of the Dead. The catch is there isn't just one Book of the Dead. There's multiple books of the dead. And the only way these parallels can be made is by drawing from all of the books of the dead and tweaking each account to match that of Jesus. Because on their own, there is no comparison. To begin with, Horus's father Osiris was actually dismembered. His body parts were cast into the river. His mother Isis found his genitals and used that to inseminate herself. And that's how Horus was born. Not exactly a virgin birth, and not at all comparable to Mary being Mary conceiving Jesus through the Holy Spirit in the claims of the Gospels. Amateur Egyptologist Gerald Massey is primarily to blame for a lot of this. Back in the 19th century, he started delving into these parallels. And he's the one that came up with Anup the baptizer. What he did was he saw pictures on Egyptian hieroglyphs of pharaohs being consecrated with water before they took their throne. It was a coronation ceremony. Now, there is no mural of Horus ever having this done to him. But he took that, called it baptism, made up, and I do mean this, made up a character named Anup the baptizer, and went with it. There is literally no tangible record of an Anup the baptizer ever having existed. This is the same case with Asar, who was raised by the dead from Horus. Horus is not recorded as raising anybody from the dead. And there is no record of anybody named Asar, or whether or not that name could be translated to Lazarus. The 12 disciples is yet another one of Massey's claims. Now here's the catch with this. The Book of the Dead, or several books of the dead, do record Horus having multiple disciples, but at no time do they ever equal 12. There's not in any form does he have 12 disciples. As far as healing the sick and the blind, the Book of the Dead does have spells that were supposedly able to do these things, but again, there's no record of Horus ever actually doing these things. And lastly, Horus being crucified is not exactly accurate either. The depictions of Horus often have his arms spread wide open. You've probably seen images of this in popular movies or even in internet searches, things like that. This is not crucifixion. This is simply a picture of Horus with his arms wide open. And this is actually a common depiction in Egyptian hieroglyphic to depict gods and even pharaohs. Drawing the parallel to crucifixion is a great leap that can be ignored. The story about Horus actually being brought back to life doesn't bear any resemblance to resurrection. It's a resuscitation. He dies, but not fully, and comes back to life. It is a resuscitation. He didn't fully die. He doesn't go to the underworld and come back. The second character in question would be Mithras. Now, this one's even more of a stretch than Horus. Mithras is the mystical god of the mystery religion Mithraism. Now, Mithraism is a mystery religion because no records exist from any Mithraists. It didn't take popularity in Rome until the end of the 1st century, and the earliest writings about it come from the 2nd century, long after Christianity has been in Rome. The claim often is made similar to that of Horus, but sometimes they say Mithras was born of a virgin. Mithras was born from a rock. Now, I don't know if the rock was a virgin, but I don't believe that matters. He was born from a rock. They also say that Mithras promised that a blood sacrifice would save the world. This is not really the case. Mithras captured a mystical bull, cut its throat, and poured its blood onto the earth, and that's where creation came from. Lastly, they say Mithras was born on December 25th. Now, for any established Christian, that should bring a red flag right to your ears. We as Christians do not believe that Jesus Christ was born on December 25th. That is simply the day that we celebrate his birth. So trying to draw that comparison simply points out how little the person making the accusation knows about the Christian faith that they're attacking. Now, the last one was, for the sake of this discussion, the last one is Osiris. Now, Osiris, again, you've already heard me talk about this. Osiris is the father of Horus. It's stated that he was called Lord of Lords, King of Kings, God of Gods, Resurrection and the Life, Good Shepherd, Eternity and Everlasting, the God who made men and women to be born again. Now, of course, all these claims are similar titles that Jesus took. Now, the truth is, these names of Jesus are not used by Osiris. In fact, none of those names are used. He was called Lord of all. He was called Good Being and Lord of the Underworld. He was called the Begetter, the Ram, the Great Word, Chief of the Spirits, and things of that nature. But a lot of these terms were actually applied to multiple gods in the Egyptian pantheon, not just Osiris. They say his birth was announced by 3 wise men. They were the 3 stars in the belt of Orion, and that a star in the east, Sirius, signified his birth. Now, it is true that some legends connect Osiris' birth with the constellation Orion, but even your most skilled Egyptologists do not state that the 3 stars in Orion's belt had anything to do with 3 wise men, or they ever called 3 wise men. And they don't stretch the Eastern Star to Osiris mythology in any way, shape, or form. Another claim is that he had a Eucharist ceremony, in which his flesh was eaten in the type of a wafer-like cake. Again, truth to this, there is no record of this ever having happened in any way, shape, or form. And the reason we know this is because much of the Osiris records still exists today and can be reviewed very easily. You would be surprised how easily this could be reviewed. And then one thing I will do for you at the end of this video that they don't do for you in Zeitgeist and they don't do for you in Religulous is I will share with you links to articles and books that can help you find the truth to these things. Another one, Osiris taught all the same material as Jesus. All the teachings are identically the same, and you can look at that. Again, no evidence for this. You can find Osiris teaching, easy to look at, easy to review. They're not even close to the same. And, of course, the claim Osiris was killed, then resurrected, and became eternal. Osiris was killed, and then he recovered in a dismembered body in the underworld. He never came back to life on the earth, never rose to walk on the earth again. He just became the Lord of the underworld or the Lord of the dead. It's not the same as Jesus' resurrection in the Gospels. It's not even close to the claim of Christianity. But here's the bigger question of these things. What does the evidence of myths before Christ, that even if they did bear similarities to Christ, what does that evidence point to? What does that have to do with the historicity of Jesus if he was a real person? It has absolutely nothing to do with it. You see, these claims only have value if you are assuming from the beginning what you're attempting to prove, that Jesus didn't exist, and I know this because of all these other myths that are like Jesus, and they didn't exist, therefore Jesus didn't exist. It's a circular reasoning argument. What needs to be done is to look at the first-hand, primary source documents regarding the historical life of Jesus. And if, after looking at that evidence, you find it lacking, then a comparison to such myth stories might be valid, but only then. And as we've already shown on the blog, and you can see in much of the writing out there by Habermas or Lacona or Stand to Reason or many other apologetics resources out there, there is more evidence for the existence of the historical Jesus than almost any other historical figure of antiquity. So we have to ask the question, what's the point? The point of the myth claim is simply to prove a preconceived idea. I don't believe Jesus exists, and this is why I don't believe he exists, because these guys didn't exist like Jesus, therefore he doesn't exist. It's not a valid argument. It's easily refuted. All you have to do is a little homework, and you'll be able to respond in kind anytime. Hope you have a good night. Enjoy Palm Sunday. Easter's around the corner, the best holiday of Christmas or Christians.